The sun hung low over Philadelphia, casting a golden hue on the bustling streets below. People moved about their daily routines, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. Just as the clock struck 3, a sudden roar pierced the air, followed by a deafening silence that fell over the neighborhood. It was an air ambulance, its bright colors flashing in the sunlight, but something was terribly wrong. In an instant, the aircraft began to spiral out of control, smoke trailing behind it like a dark omen. A young woman, Emily, was crossing the street, her phone glued to her ear as she chatted with her sister about dinner plans. She glanced up just in time to see the helicopter plummet toward the ground, a heart-stopping moment frozen in her mind. The crash echoed through the city, a cacophony of shattering glass and frantic screams. Keanu Reeves, who had been visiting the city for a film shoot, was just a few blocks away. As the noise erupted, he instinctively turned, his instincts honed by years in the public eye. He pushed through the crowd that had gathered, drawn to the billowing smoke rising from the wreckage. "Everyone, stay back," shouted a firefighter, trying to keep the onlookers at a safe distance. But Keanu felt a pull, a sense of duty to understand what had happened. He stepped forward, his heart racing as he caught sight of the twisted metal and the flashing lights of emergency vehicles converging on the scene. Among the chaos, Keanu noticed something others overlooked, a small, flickering light on the side of the wreckage, barely visible through the smoke. It was the emergency beacon, still blinking against the odds, a sign of hope amidst the despair. Most were too engrossed in their panic to see it, but Keanu's eyes were drawn to the glimmer of life in the midst of destruction. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? He thought, channeling the resilience he often portrayed in his films. As he moved closer, the reality of the situation began to sink in. People were frantically searching for loved ones, phones buzzing with desperate calls. Keanu felt a pang of empathy. He knew this scene all too well. It reminded him of the moments in his life when everything felt lost, the crushing weight of uncertainty settling in. He crouched down, trying to get a better view. The sounds of sirens filled the air, blending with the murmur of the crowd. There were murmurs of disbelief, accusations flying about pilot error or faulty equipment. Keanu knew that before any conclusions could be drawn, the truth needed to be uncovered, something that felt deeply personal to him. As the emergency responders worked diligently to assess the situation, Keanu felt an undeniable urge to help. It wasn't just about witnessing a tragedy, it was about understanding it. He knew that if he didn't act, the important details would slip away, buried beneath the noise and confusion. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the debris. Keanu stood up, scanning the area, determined to find answers. In the midst of this calamity, he had a feeling that he was about to embark on a journey that would not only change his perspective but potentially impact the lives of many others. As the first responders began to extract survivors, Keanu noticed a group of bystanders huddled together, exchanging whispers and concerned glances. They looked shaken, their faces pale. Approaching them, he introduced himself. "I'm Keanu. I want to help. Did any of you see what happened?" Their eyes widened in disbelief, but in this moment of crisis, they seemed comforted by his presence. He could feel the weight of their stories pressing against him. Each one had a thread to weave into this unfolding narrative. Together, they would seek the truth behind the tragedy that had just struck their city. In that moment, Keanu knew he wasn't just an observer. He was a part of something larger. The chaos surrounding him might have seemed insurmountable, but within it lay the seeds of hope and resilience. And as he prepared to dive deeper into the story, he felt a flicker of determination igniting within him, ready to uncover what others had missed. As the chaos of the crash scene began to settle into a frenzied rhythm of sirens and voices, Keanu Reeves took a moment to reflect on his own life, the journey that had led him to this point. Growing up in Toronto, Keanu was no stranger to hardship. Raised by a single mother, he learned early on about love, loss, and resilience. His childhood was marked by frequent moves and financial struggles, but his mother's unwavering support became his anchor. Keanu's mother, Patricia, was a woman of fierce strength, navigating life's challenges with a grace that often left him in awe. Despite their modest means, she filled their small apartment with warmth and laughter, nurturing Keanu's creativity and passion for storytelling. "Life is like a script, Keanu," she would tell him. "You may not control the plot, but you can always choose how to play your part." Those words echoed in his mind as he stood at the crash site, watching the emergency crews work tirelessly to extract survivors from the wreckage. He felt an urgency to act, to honor the lessons his mother had imparted. His heart ached for the families waiting anxiously for news of their loved ones. He understood their fear all too well. Flashbacks to his own losses surged through him. The deaths of close friends and family members had left deep scars, shaping his perspective on life. At each turn, Keanu had grappled with grief, but he learned to channel that pain into something meaningful. Acting had become his outlet, a way to connect with others and explore the intricacies of human emotion. He thought about how, throughout his career, he had often portrayed characters who faced overwhelming odds. Whether it was in The Matrix or John Wick, he played the roles of heroes who battled adversity, fighting for what was right. But now, standing in the midst of tragedy, he felt an even deeper responsibility, to be a real-life hero in a world that sometimes felt devoid of hope. As he observed the scene, he couldn't help but notice the interconnectedness of it all. People from different walks of life had come together, united by a shared sense of shock and uncertainty. He felt a pull toward the group of bystanders he had approached earlier. They were a microcosm of the city, each carrying their own stories of heartache, love, and resilience. "Why are you here?" a woman asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. She looked to be in her late 30s, with worry etched across her features. Her name was Sarah, a nurse who had rushed to the scene after hearing the crash from her nearby clinic. Keanu took a breath, sensing the weight of her question. "I'm here to help. I know what it's like to feel helpless in the face of tragedy. If I can do anything to support you, I will." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. The other bystanders began to nod, sharing their own reasons for being there. Some had family in the helicopter, others were simply drawn by the sirens, eager to assist. As they spoke, Keanu found himself connecting with them on a deeper level. Each story unfolded like a delicate thread, revealing their fears and hopes. There was Mark, a father of 3 whose wife had been on the flight. Jasmine, a college student who had just lost her mother, and Tom, an older gentleman who had witnessed a similar crash years ago. Their experiences intertwined, forming a tapestry of shared grief. Keanu listened intently, offering comfort and understanding. He realized that this gathering of strangers had the potential to become something more, a community united in their quest for answers. In the midst of their conversation, Sarah glanced at Keanu, her expression softening. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you here. It's comforting in a way." Keanu smiled gently. Sometimes, the universe has a way of bringing people together when they need it most. As dusk settled over Philadelphia, the glow of streetlights began to flicker on, illuminating the faces of those gathered around the crash site. Keanu felt a sense of purpose swelling within him. This tragedy was not just an event. It was a call to action, a chance to make a difference. He stood up, looking at the group. "Let's make sure we honor those affected by this crash. We need to share our stories and uncover the truth behind what happened. Together, we can find answers and perhaps bring some peace to those who are suffering." With renewed determination, the group rallied around him. They began to brainstorm ways to gather information and share their findings with the authorities. Keanu felt a surge of hope. In this moment, he wasn't just an observer. He was a catalyst for change. The memory of his mother's words echoed in his heart. "You may not control the plot, but you can always choose how to play your part." As they strategized together, Keanu knew that this journey would not be easy, but he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The real story was just beginning, and he was determined to uncover it, one thread at a time. As the hours passed and night fell over Philadelphia, the air buzzed with a mix of anxiety and determination. The crash site, now illuminated by the flickering lights of emergency vehicles, became a focal point of media attention. News crews set up their cameras, capturing the chaos and confusion, eager to report on the unfolding tragedy. Keanu and his group of bystanders stood together, their camaraderie strengthening as they shared stories and strategies. But amidst their efforts to seek clarity, the tensions around them began to rise. Reporters shouted questions, vying for attention, while the police attempted to manage the growing crowd. Misinformation spread like wildfire, and rumors swirled about what had caused the crash. "Did you hear? They're saying it was a mechanical failure," a woman shouted to a group nearby, her voice laced with fear. "No way. I heard it was pilot error. That's what the news is saying." Another voice chimed in, adding to the chaos. Keanu felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Misinformation could be as dangerous as the crash itself. He glanced at Sarah, who looked just as worried. "We need to be careful about what we share," he said. "Spreading rumors won't help anyone." "Right," she nodded, her brow furrowed. "But what if we don't know the truth? People need answers." Mark, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I just want to know what happened to my wife. All this noise isn't helping." His voice trembled, raw with emotion. The group fell silent, the weight of his pain hanging heavily in the air. Keanu stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We're going to find out. I promise we'll dig deeper. Let's focus on gathering the facts instead of getting swept up in speculation." As they formed a plan, Keanu noticed the tension escalate within the crowd. People jostled for position to get closer to the wreckage, while the police struggled to maintain order. It was a delicate balance, and Keanu felt a growing urgency to ensure that their small group remained focused on their mission. Suddenly, a voice broke through the chaos, an authoritative tone that demanded attention. "Everyone, please step back. We need space to work." A police officer raised his hand, trying to restore order amidst the growing panic. But the crowd was restless, and the fear of the unknown fueled their agitation. "What's going on? We have the right to know," a man shouted, pushing forward. Keanu exchanged glances with his group, sensing their apprehension. He knew they had to act swiftly. "We need to speak with the witnesses," he said, determination in his voice. "Let's find people who were closer to the scene before the crash. They might have seen something that can help." As they split up to gather information, Keanu's heart raced. He approached a small cluster of people who had been standing nearby when the crash occurred. A young man, visibly shaken, recounted the moment he saw the helicopter spiral downwards. "It just lost control. One minute it was fine, and the next, boom. I can't believe what I saw." Keanu listened intently, jotting down notes. "Did you notice anything unusual? Any sounds? Any warning signs before it crashed?" The young man shook his head, frustration creeping into his voice. "No, it all happened so fast. It was like a nightmare." As Keanu continued to gather testimonies, he felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him. Each story he collected added to the puzzle, but the mounting pressure from the crowd and media was palpable. The conflicting narratives were turning the scene into a battleground of emotions. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark were speaking with a woman who claimed she had seen the helicopter moments before it went down. "There was something wrong with it," she insisted, her voice shaking. "It was making this awful noise. I thought I was hearing things, but it was definitely struggling." Keanu rushed over, eager to capture every detail. "Can you describe the noise? Was it mechanical, or did it sound like an engine failure?" The woman hesitated, glancing around at the gathering crowd. I don't know how to explain it. Like it was sputtering and then, nothing." "Thank you," Keanu said, sensing the importance of her account. He shared a meaningful look with Sarah and Mark, who were both listening intently. They could feel the tension mounting, and they understood that time was of the essence. As they regrouped, Keanu felt a surge of determination. "We need to compile all this information. If we can get it to the right people, it might help clarify what happened. But we have to be careful. Too many rumors are flying around already." Just then, a loud crash echoed through the night as a nearby camera tripod toppled over, sending reporters scrambling. The chaos reignited, and people began to shout for answers. Keanu's heart raced. This was becoming more than just a gathering. It was a volatile mix of grief, anger, and desperation. In that moment, he realized they were standing at a crossroads. They could either let the emotions of the moment consume them, or they could channel their energy into something constructive. He took a deep breath, stepping forward to address the group. Everyone, I know you're scared and frustrated. We all are. But let's not lose sight of why we're here. We owe it to those affected by this tragedy to seek the truth, not just for ourselves, but for their families as well. The crowd began to quiet down, and the tension in the air shifted slightly. Keanu's voice, steady and calm, resonated with them. Let's work together to find answers, to ensure that this doesn't happen again. We can be the voices that bring about change. As his words hung in the air, Keanu felt a glimmer of hope. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were united in their pursuit of truth. Together, they would navigate the rising tensions and uncover the story that lay beneath the surface of the tragedy. As dawn broke over Philadelphia, a soft light began to illuminate the wreckage of the air ambulance. Keanu and his group of determined bystanders stood huddled together, armed with their notes and a growing sense of purpose. The chaos of the previous night felt like a distant memory, replaced by an urgent resolve to uncover the truth behind the crash. Today is about gathering evidence, Keanu said, addressing the group as they prepared to embark on their investigative journey. We need to speak with as many witnesses as possible, document their stories, and share what we find with the authorities. Every detail counts. Sarah nodded, her eyes bright with determination. I can head back to the crash site to see if anyone is still there who might have more information. Mark, would you like to come with me? Mark, still reeling from the loss of his wife, hesitated for a moment, but then agreed. I want to do this. I need to know what happened. Meanwhile, Keanu planned to revisit the media area, hoping to connect with reporters who might have insider knowledge about the crash. The chaos of the night before had subsided, but the atmosphere was still charged with urgency. He could feel the weight of expectation on his shoulders. People were looking to him for answers. As he made his way through the thinning crowd, Keanu spotted a reporter he recognized from the previous evening. "Excuse me," he called out, approaching her. "I'm Keanu Reeves. I was at the crash site last night. Do you have any updates on what's happening?" The reporter, Lisa, looked surprised but quickly regained her composure. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't expect to see you here again. We're still waiting on statements from the authorities. So far, all we know is that there were multiple injuries and at least one fatality." Keanu's heart sank at the thought of the victims. "Do you have any leads on what might have caused the crash? There are a lot of conflicting reports out there." Lisa sighed, glancing around as if searching for answers. "The officials have stated that they're conducting an investigation, but there's been talk of mechanical failure. Some witnesses claimed they heard strange noises before it went down, but nothing has been confirmed yet. Do you know if anyone has spoken to the flight crew or their families?" Keanu pressed, feeling a sense of urgency. Those perspectives could be crucial. "I'm not sure," Lisa admitted. "I can try to find out, but they're keeping a tight lid on information for now. They don't want to jump to conclusions." Keanu nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "If you hear anything, please let me know. I'll be gathering information from witnesses as well." As he departed, he felt a mix of hope and frustration. The pieces were starting to come together, but the uncertainty loomed large. He made his way back to the crash site, where Sarah and Mark were still talking to witnesses. "Did you find anything new?" Keanu asked, joining them. Mark shook his head, his expression somber. "Everyone we spoke to is just as confused as we are. They saw and heard things, but no one seems to have a clear picture." Just then, a familiar face emerged from the crowd, Tom, the older gentleman who had been standing nearby during the crash. He approached with a sense of urgency. "I've been looking for you all. I might have seen something important." Keanu's heart raced. "What is it?" "I was in my apartment overlooking the landing area. I saw the helicopter as it approached. It looked like it was struggling. It banked hard to the left, and then I heard a pop before it went down. I thought it was just my imagination, but now I'm not so sure." "Did you see anything else? Maybe smoke or warning lights?" Keanu urged. Tom furrowed his brow, deep in thought. "Not smoke, but I do remember seeing a flicker on the side. I thought it was just the sunlight reflecting off the windows, but now I wonder if it was the emergency beacon." "Thank you, Tom. This is crucial," Keanu said, jotting down notes. The group gathered closer, the weight of Tom's words sinking in. Do you think it could be a mechanical failure? Sarah asked, her concern evident. It's possible, Keanu replied, but we need more evidence to back it up. We have to keep digging. As they continued to speak with other witnesses, Keanu felt a growing sense of urgency. He and the group had become a support system for one another, sharing the emotional burden of the tragedy while pushing each other to find answers. Suddenly, Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face paling as he read the message. It's from the hospital. They're giving updates on the victims. Let's go. Keanu urged, his heart pounding. The hospital was just a few blocks away, and they hurriedly made their way through the streets, the weight of the world pressing down on them. Once they arrived, they found a waiting area filled with anxious families, some sobbing quietly while others paced restlessly. Keanu felt a pang of empathy as he looked around. He knew these people were clinging to the hope of news about their loved ones. Mark approached a nurse, desperation etched on his face. Excuse me, can you tell us anything about the victims from the crash? The nurse paused, her expression softening. I can't provide details on individuals, but I can tell you that several patients are in critical condition and we're doing everything we can to help them. As the nurse moved away, Keanu felt a sense of helplessness wash over him. He turned to his group, their eyes reflecting the same feelings of anxiety and despair. But deep down, he knew they had to keep moving forward. Let's split up, he suggested. Sarah and I can talk to the families here and see if they have any information. Mark, if you're up for it, you can check with the authorities outside for updates. Mark nodded, his determination ignited once more. I'm ready. As they separated, Keanu approached a group of families gathered in a corner. He introduced himself, his heart heavy with empathy. I'm here to help. If anyone is willing to share their loved one's stories, it might help us piece together what happened. One woman, tears streaming down her face, nodded slowly. My brother was on that helicopter. He was a paramedic, always helping others. Keanu listened intently, feeling the gravity of her words. This was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It was about honoring those who had been affected by the crash. He knew that with each story shared, they were one step closer to understanding the tragedy that had unfolded. The investigative journey had begun, and while the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, Keanu felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. They were not just seeking answers. They were weaving together the lives of those impacted, transforming their pain into a powerful narrative that could lead to change. And with each story, they would shine a light on the truth that had been obscured in the shadows of tragedy. The atmosphere in the hospital was thick with tension as families awaited news about their loved ones. Keanu moved from group to group, listening to heartbreaking stories and offering support where he could. Each tale he heard added another layer to the tragedy, deepening his resolve to uncover the truth. As he spoke with a mother whose daughter had been on the helicopter, he felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. She was just starting her career as a paramedic, the woman said, her voice cracking. She wanted to save lives. How could this happen? Keanu's heart ached for her. I'm so sorry. We're trying to find answers. If you remember anything, even the smallest detail, please let me know. It might help. The woman nodded, wiping away tears. I just wish I could have told her how much I loved her one last time. In that moment, Keanu felt the weight of their collective grief. It was no longer just about gathering facts. It was about giving voice to the voiceless and honoring the memories of those lost. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his own emotions. Suddenly, Sarah rushed over, her face pale with urgency. Keanu, we need to talk. I just heard something that might change everything. What is it? He asked, his heart racing. I spoke to a mechanic who worked on that helicopter. He said there had been some issues reported in the weeks leading up to the crash. They were supposed to perform maintenance, but it got delayed. He wasn't sure if they went through with it. Keanu felt a cold chill run down his spine. Did he say what kind of issues? Something about the rotor system. He mentioned it could cause a catastrophic failure if not addressed, Sarah replied, her voice filled with urgency. Keanu's mind raced. This could be a critical piece of information. We have to get this to the authorities. If there was negligence involved, people need to know. Wait, Mark interjected, his face serious. What if they don't take us seriously? We're just a group of bystanders. We need proof, something tangible to back this up. Keanu nodded, understanding the gravity of Mark's concerns. You're right. Let's see if we can find any documentation or witnesses that can corroborate what Sarah heard. This is about more than just information. It's about justice for those affected. As they discussed their next steps, the hospital's doors swung open, and a group of officials stepped inside. The sight of them sent a ripple of tension through the waiting area. Keanu felt a surge of hope. Perhaps they would bring the answers everyone was desperately seeking. Mark nudged Keanu. Let's approach them. They might have updates on the investigation. As they walked toward the officials, Keanu felt a mix of anticipation and dread. He knew they needed to be assertive, but also respectful of the situation. Excuse me, he called out, gaining the attention of one of the officers. We've been gathering information about the crash. We believe there may have been mechanical issues that weren't addressed. The officer looked surprised but maintained a professional demeanor. We appreciate your concern, but we are conducting a thorough investigation. Any information you have should be directed to the official channels. But we've spoken with witnesses and people connected to the helicopter, Keanu pressed. This could be crucial to your investigation. Sir, we will take all information into account. However, I cannot disclose details of the ongoing investigation at this time, the officer replied, his tone firm. Keanu felt frustration bubbling beneath the surface. But people's lives are at stake. They deserve to know the truth. The officer's expression softened slightly, but he remained resolute. I understand your passion, but we must follow protocol. If you have information, please submit it in writing. We will review it. As they stepped back, Keanu exchanged glances with Sarah and Mark, feeling defeated but also determined. They had to keep pushing for the truth. Let's regroup, Keanu said, leading them to a quieter corner of the hospital. We need to find that mechanic and gather as much evidence as we can. We can't let this slip away. With renewed determination, they left the hospital, setting out to locate the mechanic Sarah had spoken with. They learned he worked at a hangar near the airport, and as they approached, a sense of urgency propelled them forward. Upon arrival, they found the mechanic, a middle-aged man named Mike, busy with a wrench. He looked up as they approached, curiosity mingling with caution. Can I help you? Mike, we heard you might have information about the helicopter that crashed, Keanu said, his tone serious. It's important. Mike wiped his hands on a rag, his expression shifting to one of concern. Yeah, I heard about it. Terrible tragedy. Can you tell us what you know? Sarah pressed, her voice filled with urgency. We believe there may have been issues that weren't addressed. Mike sighed heavily, glancing around as if ensuring no one was listening. I can't talk about it here. Too many years. Meet me at the diner down the street in 30 minutes. We can talk there. As they nodded in agreement, Keanu felt a mix of hope and anxiety. This could be the breakthrough they needed. At the diner, they settled into a booth, the smell of coffee and greasy food filling the air. Keanu drummed his fingers on the table, anticipation building. Mike arrived shortly, his expression serious as he slid into the booth across from them. All right, here's the deal, he began, glancing around once more. That helicopter had issues with the rotor system. I reported it several times, but it kept getting pushed aside. They were due for maintenance, but it was never completed. Why not? Keanu asked, leaning in closer. Management said it was fine for now. They didn't want to spend the money, and you know how it goes. Money talks. They figured it could wait. I didn't agree, but there's only so much one person can do, Mike explained, his frustration palpable. This is huge, Sarah said, her eyes wide. We have to get this information to the families and the media. They need to know it wasn't just an accident. Be careful, Mike warned, his voice low. This kind of information can lead to a lot of trouble. You'll need solid proof if you plan to go public. Keanu felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. We will. Thank you for sharing this. We'll make sure your voice is heard. As Mike left the diner, Keanu looked at Sarah and Mark, determination shining in their eyes. We need to compile everything we have, witness statements, Mike's testimony, and anything else we can find. This isn't just about the crash. It's about justice for the victims and accountability for those responsible. In that moment, Keanu realized how intertwined their fates had become. They were no longer just bystanders. They were advocates for truth, driven by the desire to honor those who had suffered. And as they prepared to fight for justice, the emotional stakes felt higher than ever. The truth was within reach, and they would stop at nothing to uncover it. The sun dipped low in the Philadelphia sky, casting long shadows over the city as Keanu, Sarah, and Mark worked tirelessly to compile their findings. The diner had become their makeshift command center, filled with notes, witness statements, and the critical testimony from Mike, the mechanic. Each piece of information brought them closer to the truth, but the emotional toll was starting to weigh heavily on them. "Let's review what we have," Keanu said, gathering the scattered papers on the table. "We need to create a clear narrative that captures the sequence of events and the factors that led to the crash." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We have witness accounts about strange noises, Mike's testimony about the rotor system, and the delays in maintenance. It all points to a serious issue that could have been avoided." Mark, his voice steady yet filled with pain, added, "We can't forget the personal stories. Each of these people had lives, families, and dreams. We owe it to them to tell their story right." Keanu felt a swell of pride for his companions. They had transformed their grief and anger into something constructive. "You're right, Mark. This isn't just about facts. It's about honoring the lives lost and ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again." As they continued to piece together their narrative, they could feel a sense of urgency building within them. Time was of the essence, and they knew they needed to act swiftly to get their findings into the hands of the authorities and the media. Just as they were finalizing their notes, Sarah's phone buzzed with a new message. She glanced at it, her eyes widening. "It's from Lisa, the reporter. She wants to meet us."
Now?
Mark asked, glancing at the clock. It was already late in the day. "Yeah, she's at a nearby park. She wants to discuss the story," Sarah replied, her excitement palpable. "Let's go," Keanu urged, feeling a rush of adrenaline. This could be the moment they needed to bring their findings to light. They hurried to the park, the evening air cool against their skin. As they approached, they spotted Lisa sitting on a bench, her notepad in hand. She looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to interest as she recognized Keanu. "Thanks for coming," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "I've been hearing some troubling rumors about the crash. I wanted to hear your side of the story." Keanu took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their collective emotions. "We've gathered a lot of information about what happened, and it's important that you understand the context." He began to share their findings, outlining the witness statements, Mike's testimony about the rotor system, and the lapses in maintenance that had occurred. Lisa listened intently, jotting down notes and asking probing questions. "This is significant," she said, her tone serious. "If what you're saying is true, it could point to negligence on the part of the operators. Have you considered reaching out to the families of the victims? They need to know what really happened." Mark's eyes darkened at the mention of the victims. "We want to, but we're still gathering everything. We don't want to add to their pain without solid proof." "I understand," Lisa replied, her voice softening, "but time is critical. If you have this information, you need to act. I can help you get it out to the media, but you have to be prepared for the fallout." Keanu nodded, feeling a mixture of resolve and anxiety. "We're ready to take that step. The truth needs to come out." As they wrapped up their meeting with Lisa, a sense of determination filled the air. They were on the brink of something significant, something that could change the narrative surrounding the crash and hold those responsible accountable. Later that evening, Keanu sat with Sarah and Mark in their small apartment, a stack of documents spread out before them. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation as they prepared to reach out to the families of the victims. "Are we sure we're ready for this?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What if we reopen wounds that haven't healed?" Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We can't ignore the truth. These families deserve to know what really happened, even if it's painful." Keanu took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their mission. "We have to approach this with compassion. We're not just delivering news. We're sharing information that could lead to change. We have to be sensitive to their feelings. As they crafted their message, Keanu felt a surge of empathy. Each family had suffered a loss that could never be replaced, and they were on the brink of uncovering a truth that could potentially save lives in the future. After sending out their messages, they waited, their hearts racing with anticipation. The silence felt heavy, filled with unspoken fears and hopes. Finally, as night fell, responses began to trickle in. Families were grateful for the information, and many expressed a desire to meet. Keanu felt a mix of relief and apprehension. This was the moment they had worked toward, but it would also be the most emotionally charged part of their journey. The following days were filled with meetings, tears, and stories. Keanu and his group sat with families, sharing the findings they had gathered and listening to the stories of those who had been lost. The pain in the room was palpable, but there was also a sense of solidarity, a shared desire for justice. As they shared the truth with each family, Keanu felt a profound sense of purpose. They were not just uncovering facts, they were weaving together a narrative that honored the lives lost. Each conversation reinforced their mission, and the emotional weight of the journey became a catalyst for change. In one meeting, a mother who had lost her son reached across the table, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for doing this. It means the world to know that his story isn't forgotten. I want others to be safe." Keanu nodded, his own heart heavy with emotion. "We will make sure his story is heard. We're all in this together." As they continued their journey, Keanu reflected on the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. Each person they met reminded him of the importance of truth and accountability. The stories of loss transformed into stories of hope, and together they forged a path toward change. With each step forward, they felt a sense of unity and purpose that transcended their individual pain. They were now advocates, standing firm in their commitment to honor the lives lost and fight for the truth. And as they looked ahead, Keanu knew they were just beginning to make a difference. The road ahead would be challenging, but they were ready to face whatever came next, driven by the desire to create a safer world for everyone. As the weeks passed, the momentum of their investigation grew. Keanu, Sarah, and Mark worked tirelessly, collaborating with families, gathering more testimonies, and engaging with journalists eager to tell their story. The media coverage surrounding the crash began to escalate, fueled by the revelations of mechanical failures and maintenance neglect. One crisp morning, Keanu stood outside the hospital with Sarah and Mark, their breaths visible in the cool air. They were about to give a press conference, an opportunity to share their findings with the public and demand accountability. "Are we ready for this?" Sarah asked, her voice wavering slightly. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." Keanu nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "We're doing this for the families. They deserve to be heard, and we need to shine a light on the truth." As they stepped up to the podium, the gathered crowd of reporters, cameras, and concerned citizens filled the space in front of them. Keanu took a deep breath and cleared his throat, the moment palpable with emotion. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady. "We stand before you not just as bystanders, but as advocates for the lives lost in the tragic air ambulance crash in Philadelphia. Each life taken was a story that matters, and it's time for those stories to be told." Sarah took her turn, sharing the findings they had gathered. "We have spoken with families, witnesses, and experts who all point to critical maintenance issues that were ignored. The helicopter was not fit for flight, and these preventable failures led to this heartbreaking tragedy." Mark followed, his voice strong despite the pain etched on his face. "We're calling for accountability. We demand a thorough investigation into the practices of the operators and an assurance that changes will be made so that no other families have to endure this kind of loss." The reporters leaned in, jotting down notes and raising their hands with questions. Keanu felt a surge of empowerment. They were no longer just voices in the crowd. They were being heard. As the press conference concluded, a wave of emotions washed over them. Relief mixed with anxiety about the impact of their revelations. Would this lead to real change? Would the families find some semblance of justice? That evening, as they regrouped at the diner, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. News outlets began reporting on their findings, and the community rallied behind them. Social media exploded with support, and a petition for accountability quickly gained traction. "We did it," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling. "People are listening." "Yeah, but we have to stay vigilant," Mark cautioned. "This is just the beginning. We can't let up now." As the days turned into weeks, the investigation continued to unfold. The family's pain remained at the forefront, but there was also a newfound hope. Keanu and his group received messages from people sharing their own experiences with air travel safety and demanding change. Then, one afternoon, they received a call that would change everything. The authorities had scheduled a meeting to discuss the findings of their investigation, and they wanted Keanu, Sarah, and Mark to attend. "This is it," Keanu said, his heart racing. "This is our chance to make an impact." When the day arrived, they entered a large conference room filled with officials and representatives from the helicopter company. The tension in the air was palpable, and Keanu could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. After formal introductions, the lead investigator spoke. "We appreciate the information you've brought to light. It's critical that we address these safety concerns, and we want to ensure that the families affected are at the center of this discussion." Keanu, feeling the urgency of the moment, leaned forward. "Thank you for hearing us. This is about more than just policies. It's about the lives that were lost and the families that are left to pick up the pieces. We want to ensure that these tragedies don't happen again." As they presented their findings, Keanu could see the officials taking notes and discussing amongst themselves. The dialogue shifted from accusations to solutions. They spoke of implementing stricter regulations, improving maintenance protocols, and creating a transparent reporting system for safety issues. "Your voices are important," one official said. "We want to work collaboratively to make the necessary changes." The meeting concluded with a sense of purpose that invigorated Keanu and his group. They had made a significant impact, but the work wasn't done yet. The path to real change would take time, and they were prepared to continue fighting. Afterward, as they walked out of the building, Keanu turned to Sarah and Mark, a smile breaking across his face. "We did it. We made them listen." Mark, still cautious, replied, "Let's not celebrate too soon. We need to keep the pressure on." "We will," Keanu assured him. "But today is a step in the right direction." As they celebrated their small victory, Keanu reflected on the journey they had undertaken. What had started as a traumatic event had transformed into a movement for change. They were no longer just advocates for the families. They were a collective force for accountability and safety in aviation. But amidst the joy of their progress, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, obstacles to navigate, and voices that would try to silence them. Yet he felt a deep conviction that they were on the right path. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about the lives they were fighting for and the impact they could make. The weight of their mission hung heavy, but so did the hope that change was possible. And with each step forward, they were not just honoring the past. They were building a safer future for everyone. In the days that followed, they stayed in touch with the families, providing updates on their progress and reassuring them that their loved ones would not be forgotten. The bonds they formed with those families became a source of strength, propelling them forward even in the face of adversity. Keanu knew that the rail work was just beginning. They were now part of a larger movement, one that demanded accountability and safety in all aspects of life. And as they prepared for the next steps, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, fueled by the stories of those they had lost and the hope of a brighter future. As the investigation continued to unfold, the impact of Keanu, Sarah, and Mark's efforts began to resonate throughout Philadelphia and beyond. Their story garnered attention not just locally, but nationally. News outlets covered the family's stories, highlighting the urgent need for change in aviation safety standards. Social media campaigns proliferated, with the hashtag Justice for the Victims trending as more and more people joined the fight for accountability. One rainy afternoon, Keanu sat at his desk, scrolling through social media posts and reading messages of support from around the country. Each message fueled his determination, reminding him why they had embarked on this journey in the first place. The outpouring of solidarity made him feel connected to something much larger than himself. "Hey, Keanu," Sarah called from the living room, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "You need to see this." Curious, Keanu got up and joined her. She was watching a news segment featuring families affected by the crash, their stories intertwined with footage of the press conference and their recent meeting with the authorities. The segment showcased their fight for justice and the proposed changes in aviation regulations. As they watched, Keanu felt a swell of pride. "We're making a difference," he said softly. Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "And it's only the beginning. If we keep pushing, we can ensure that what happened doesn't happen again." A few days later, they received an unexpected invitation. The authorities wanted to host a public forum to discuss the findings and proposed changes in aviation safety regulations, and they invited the families and their advocates to speak. "This is an incredible opportunity," Mark said, his enthusiasm evident. "We can make our voices heard in a big way." "Definitely," Keanu agreed. "But we need to prepare. We want to make sure our message is clear and impactful." They spent the following days drafting speeches, gathering stories, and preparing to represent not only the families, but also all those who had ever felt the impact of negligence in safety protocols. The weight of responsibility hung over them, but it also fueled their passion. On the day of the forum, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Community members, officials, and families filled the auditorium, their collective energy palpable. Keanu, Sarah, and Mark took their places at the front, each of them carrying the stories of those they had lost. The event began with a presentation from the authorities detailing the findings of the investigation, the lapses in safety, and the changes they intended to implement. Keanu felt a mix of relief and anxiety as they outlined new regulations for helicopter maintenance and stricter oversight. Then, it was time for the families to share their stories. One by one, they took the microphone, their voices trembling but resolute. Keanu listened intently as they spoke about their loved ones, stories filled with laughter, dreams, and aspirations cut short by the tragedy. When it was his turn, Keanu stepped up to the microphone, his heart racing. "I stand before you today not just as an advocate but as a person profoundly affected by this tragedy. Each life lost in the crash was not just a statistic. They were brothers, sisters, parents, friends. They had dreams, and they mattered." His voice shook with emotion, but he pressed on. "What we are asking for is accountability and change. We cannot allow negligence to dictate who gets to go home at the end of the day. This is about ensuring that no other family has to endure the pain we have felt." As he spoke, he could see nods of agreement from the audience, a collective understanding of the urgency of their cause. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, the sound echoing like a rallying cry for justice. After the speeches, the forum transitioned into a Q&A session, where community members expressed their concerns and asked questions about the proposed changes. Keanu felt a wave of support washing over them. People were eager to join the fight for safer air travel. As the forum concluded, Keanu stepped outside, feeling a sense of accomplishment. They had not only shared their message, but had also sparked a community movement. People were motivated to hold operators accountable, and the dialogue around aviation safety was expanding. Over the following weeks, the changes they fought for began to take shape. The authorities announced a series of new regulations, requiring all operators to adhere to stricter maintenance schedules and to report any mechanical issues promptly. Advocacy groups began forming, aimed at promoting aviation safety and supporting families affected by similar tragedies. Keanu, Sarah, and Mark found themselves at the forefront of this movement, participating in interviews, panel discussions, and community outreach events. The journey was far from over, but they felt emboldened by the progress they had made together. One evening, as they gathered at their apartment, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and camaraderie. They shared stories, reflecting on how far they had come and the bonds they had formed. "I can't believe how much we've accomplished," Sarah said, her eyes shining. "It feels surreal." "It's incredible," Mark agreed. "But we have to keep pushing. This is just the beginning of a long fight for safety." Keanu nodded, feeling a sense of purpose wash over him. "We're in this together. We've turned our pain into action, and we owe it to the families and the lives lost to keep moving forward." As they raised their glasses for a toast, Keanu felt a renewed sense of hope. They had transformed their grief into a powerful force for change, and the journey ahead held endless possibilities. Together, they were not just advocates. They were a family united by a common cause. In the months that followed, Keanu often reflected on that fateful day when the crash had changed everything. The pain of loss would never fully fade, but it had led him to something profound, a sense of purpose, a connection with others, and a commitment to ensure that no one else would have to endure such tragedy. As he looked around at Sarah and Mark, he felt a sense of gratitude. They had turned a moment of despair into a movement of hope, and together, they were determined to make a difference, one step at a time. The future was uncertain, but with their resolve, they were ready to face whatever came next, united in their mission to create a safer world for all.